The academic year is almost finished in State College, but the Penn State athletics action, it's not slowing down anytime soon. Welcome to the Penn State Athletics Update brought to you by Penn State Sports Night. I'm Zach Gershman, joined alongside by Tim Rogers. And Tim, whether it's softball finally finding its groove in the Big Ten this past weekend against Rutgers or the high-flying action taking place at Rec Hall for men's gymnastics, Penn State Sports Night was there to capture it all.
Zach, I couldn't have said it better myself. So let's just jump into it, shall we? Penn State baseball have been enjoying the Dollar Dog Nights at Medler Field with big wins against West Virginia and Purdue. The Nittany Lions fell in their last two outings with Jacob Cheris and Logan Bourandas catching all the action. Jacob, break it down for us.
Thanks, Tim. Penn State is on a bit of a cold streak as of late, dropping its last two contests against Purdue. But the Nittany Lions made headlines last week, taking down number 24 West Virginia. Take a look.
Looking to extend a three-game winning streak, the Nittany Lions found themselves in a big hole early on, down 5-0 heading into the bottom of the fourth inning. But with a new uniform to celebrate Military Appreciation Night, the Nittany Lions weren't going to go down easy. After finally cracking the scoreboard in the fourth, Penn State would explode for a 7-run sixth inning, capped off with a Kyle Hannon inside the park grand slam. Penn State wouldn't look back from there, adding 3 more in the 7th inning to cap off one of its biggest wins of the season. Manager Rob Cooper praised his squad for keeping a level mindset despite the early deficit.
There's a saying in baseball that momentum's only as good as your starting pitcher, and you know, that's a saying, and obviously pitching helps, but I think momentum's only as good as your mindset. You know, if you realize what it took tonight to win, not one guy trying to do it by themselves, playing as a team, playing free and easy, you're never out of it, be baseball players, get to the next pitch, that's something you can carry forward.
After the 4th inning, the Mountaineers only mustered up 1 more run the rest of the game. Tommy Molsky, the winning pitcher on the night, said giving the offense a chance was key.
Yeah, we've struggled recently giving up runs in tight spots or letting a lot tally on in one inning, but really just shutting that down and giving our hitters a chance to get up and retake the lead there was huge.
A big force behind the comeback win was a packed house at Medler Field, which saw 2,700 fans. And after a loss in front of that same crowd last Tuesday, Cooper and his team were determined to make it up to the Penn State faithful.
It's awesome, and I think if you were to ask our guys, you know, obviously we had a great crowd last week too. Didn't play well in our opinion, and you know, I know our guys were determined to play better in front of our home crowd, and we did.
But in regards to the 5,287 hot dogs consumed on Dollar Dog Night, Cooper bet the under.
By the way, I think I was pretty darn close to guessing it. What did I say?
I think 51 something.
Yeah, I was close. So like on the Price is Right, I was under, so I'd probably move on. Yeah.
Reporting for Penn State Sports Night, I'm Logan Bourandas.
A very exciting contest last week against West Virginia. People were saying that it was probably the loudest they've ever heard Medlar. So Logan, what were your big takeaways from the series?
Well, being there in person, Jacob, I think we could tell that probably was the loudest we've seen Medler Field in quite some time. And this is what I like to call a character win for Penn State. And this is a very talented West Virginia team. They were ranked in the top 25, like you were talking about earlier. Just the second top 25 win that Penn State's had on the season this year, beating Miami in their first game. And this was not an easy game to win. West Virginia has some talented hitters in the top of their lineup. And Penn State, they have a talented lineup on their own from top to bottom, and it was shown in full display during that 6th inning where Penn State was finally able to take the lead, and it was all capped off by that Kyle Hannon inside the park grand slam, something that you never see at all, and now it's being seen everywhere. It's Sports Center, posted pretty much everywhere you could possibly think of, and even after kind of a slow start for Penn State's pitching staff, Ben DeMel got the start. He struggled early on. Penn State's bullpen really picked up the slack on Dollar Dog Night in front of that big crowd and came away with that big win heading into their series against Purdue.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, they traveled to Purdue over the past weekend. They lost the series 2-1. So I want to ask you, what were your big takeaways in that road series?
Well, Penn State missed a lot of opportunities to kind of rebound in conference play because as much as we want to talk about as Penn State's lineup being as good as it is right now, they're in last in the Big Ten right now, only 2 conference wins. Of course, one of those came against Purdue in that series. In that first game, even had a 12-run inning in that big win. but they weren't really as effective offensively. It's kind of hard to be as effective after a game like that. They still kept both those last 2 games close. They lost both of them by 1 run, but they were unable to kind of spark that late comeback to win both those games, and now it puts Penn State in a bit of a hole. Because obviously only the top 8 teams in the Big Ten Conference make the Big Ten tournament, a spot which Penn State was able to find itself in last year. But they have a pretty rough schedule ahead to kind of close out conference play. So we'll see just how Penn State can look to rebound.
Yep, and Penn State was also without one of their better hitters in Johnny PSSN, so that was obviously probably a big factor in both those losses, Logan. So moving forward, Penn State is going to be playing the Ohio State Buckeyes, another Big Ten opponent. What do they have to do to rebound, and looking forward ahead to the rest of the season?
Well, this is going to be a huge series for the Nittany Lions because you talk about Penn State being at the bottom of the Big Ten, Ohio State not that far from them, just a game up on the Nittany Lions. So this is a big opportunity for Penn State. But you talk about what's been the issue for the Nittany Lions, it's been on the pitching staff. In Game 1, they seem to do fine with Jaden Henline, Travis Lunsman, those guys kind of getting the bulk of the innings, you would say, for Penn State. But the rest of the other games, they haven't really been able to figure things out. That was kind of shown last time these two teams met. Penn State won Game 1, but they lost both games 2 and 3 by more than 9 runs. So it's going to be a big series going back home for conference play. And Penn State, they do have some ground to make up the last couple series. They're down by 2 games to the number 8 seed right now in the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, who they do play later on in the season, one of the 2 Big Ten road series they have left, and the other one against Nebraska, who currently sits at the top of the Big Ten Conference. But we've seen Penn State be competitive against those teams all season long. Of course, one of their wins in conference play came against the Indiana Hoosiers, who are in second place right now in the Big Ten. But if this lineup can kind of do what it's been doing so far, Kyle Hannon, he's been on a historic pace so far, 5th in program history in stolen bases on the season. You talk about Johnny Piacentino, he hasn't played since April 2nd, but Penn State's been putting up a lot of good run totals so far this season, with Kyle Hannon kind of leading the charge. You have some other good pieces there as well. Jay Harry's had a really good season. Billy Gerlot's done really well. Some of those guys in that lineup. So the journey isn't over just yet for Penn State. There's still a lot of Big Ten play to go, but if they want to get back to the Big Ten tournament, it's going to have to start with a good showing this weekend against the Buckeyes.
Yep, absolutely. Big Ten's always tough. So it should be a very exciting finish to the season. Now, back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks, gentlemen. Now, Zach, baseball has definitely had its ups and downs this season. Doing well at home, however, and, you know, they only have one guy that's really impressing me right now in Kyle Hannon. So, Zach, what else do you need to see from this team?
Well, Kyle Hannon had the play of the century from what it appeared on SportsCenter and all the other social media outlets out there with that Little League inside the park home run. But to answer your question, what do they need? They need more dollar dog nights. The fans show up and the players truly, they respond to it and they rallied around it, as you see all over their social media, guessing the over-under on what the dollar dogs are going to be. And the fans, they are heavily involved with it. But let's go from one diamond over to the other diamond, where it was a pretty sweet weekend at Beard Field as the Nittany Lions softball team took all 3 games against the Scarlet Knights of Rutgers. Allie, Wenskoski, Joey David, our Sports Night softball beat reporters. How did Penn State finally bounce back after the previous couple series resulted in a handful of losses?
Thanks, Tim and Zach. Penn State softball faced some more Big Ten opponents this week. They were swept by Northwestern, lost a doubleheader at home against Ohio State, and then turned things around to sweep Rutgers at Beard Field. Joey and I were at this week's games and saw all of the action. So, Joey, Penn State ended a 2-week-long stretch where they were away with a series at Northwestern. Tell me what you saw in this face-off.
So, starting off at Northwestern, Game 1, they pitched by committee. They used all 4 of the pitchers that they've normally used so far this season, and they really were not planning on doing that. There were multiple fielding errors. The fielding errors led to, obviously, people on base, and then they started hitting home runs. Game 2, it was pretty much the same thing. Fielding errors were really hurting the roster. And then Game 3, again, the same thing. They couldn't get the bats going. Just a lot of different struggles. And then fielding errors. Every time you look at the box score, you see a number that's at least 2. And you cannot have that when you're playing a team like Northwestern still in Big Ten play.
No, I completely agree. Penn State did not play up to their potential, especially in that second game where they were mercied 24-5. And when you just put up 24 runs, when your opponent puts up 24 runs, that's not a great sign for your defense. And only 7 of those runs were earned for Northwestern, showing that 3 errors can do a whole lot of damage for Penn State, as well as their pitching just wasn't up to their usual standard as well. But moving forward, they did come home finally after 2 weeks to play Ohio State at Beard Field. And it was a doubleheader as well on Tuesday, but things just didn't go as planned. So, Joey, what was the problem in this series?
This problem, the bats weren't coming off the shoulders. Game 1, it was a big issue for the team. The bats were not coming off the shoulders. They couldn't get on. They couldn't find the holes in the field. And that's really what it came down to. Ohio State just shut them down. But then it was a completely different story in Game 2 because the bats were coming off the shoulders. They were stringing together hits. They just couldn't get the players home. And I'm not sure what else they could have done. And they ended up making the adjustment. The adjustment just wasn't enough.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it came down to their lack of pitching. So Bailey Partial and Kylie Ligenfelter both received losses on the day. They struggled a little bit, but Bailey Partial was able to pitch 7 combined innings throughout the day. And she did pitch the first 2 in the first game, and she struck out the side in both of them. So she struck out 6 straight batters, but then things kind of crumbled from there, and it just wasn't their best showing, and that showed when they lost to Ohio State. But moving forward, once again, they were free of the doubleheaders until Friday became one with the rain, and things started to go a little bit better with them, especially with pitching. So what did you see in Rutgers that was different than earlier in the week?
Rutgers was a great weekend to be a softball fan. The weather was beautiful, and Penn State finally looked like how they did earlier in the season. Kylie Ligenfelter threw the best game I've seen her throw since Big Ten play has started. She usually has control issues, and once that happens, the walks will start mounting up, and then she's in bad places that are ending up being really hard to get through. But none of that. She was striking out batters, she was letting the ball get into play and trusting the field behind them, and she did a great job. But then you look at Game 2, the Maddie Gordon game. She hit a grand slam for the first time in years. That hasn't happened in a very long time for Penn State. Maggie Finnegan had 3 hits. She looked great. Bailey Partial went 7 innings straight for them. It was a great showing again in Game 2 with another win. Now we'll go to Game 3, which was on Sunday, and Maddie Gordon went yard again. And then that's obviously a 2-home-run weekend is great. That's her 2 home runs on her career and the season as well. And both Partial and Ligenfelter practically split the game in half. You can't split 7 innings in half, so one of them went 3.1, the other one went 3.2. But both of them threw a great game. They were tallying up strikeouts. I believe they had around 9 combined. And they did their job on the mound, and the team did their job at the plate. But the biggest person that I have to give a shout out to is catcher Morgan Farrow, because she did not really see the field, but she was the person that was heard most throughout all of Beard Field. She was in the dugout, she was being loud, she was rallying the troops, and she had that dugout in the game more than I've seen at all so far this season. And that's a big aspect of the game that people don't talk about enough, is being rowdy in the dugout and cheering on your teammates. Because as we saw in this series, Penn State was able to do that, and they were loud and they were into it, and 3 wins came on the board.
Yeah, it was quite a different team than we saw earlier in the week in that past series against Northwestern. And it was down to their pitching, like you said. They won the first game 1-0, and then they won the second game 3-0. And Bailey Partial, Kylie Ligenfelter both went complete games on Friday. And then they were the 1-2 on Sunday. You can't ask anything better than that if you're a Penn State fan. They were just incredible. And the bats came alive, like you said. So Maddie Gordon, that was the first time in Penn State history, or at least in 4 years, that they have hit a grand slam. And then as well, Maggie Finnegan hit her first home run of this season as well. So it's great to see both balance back and forth for them. And it was really a difference in their pitching and defense, which made the difference for them. Now let's take a look at how Penn State was able to fix their defense from earlier in the week.
The Nittany Lions fell in back-to-back losses to start off the week in a Tuesday night doubleheader against Ohio State. Although Penn State scored a combined 6 runs, they gave up 13, proving their pitching and defense to be anything but rock solid. Penn State returned to Beard Field to play the Scarlet Knights and ended up sweeping the series, shutting out the first 2 games and winning the third 8-3. But the main difference in these 2 series was their pitching. In the doubleheader, there was double the complete games, with both Kylie Ligenfelter and Bailey Partial dueling 7 innings each. The pair were lights out and did not let Rutgers score a single run on Friday.
On a day that was a summer preview, Penn State was red hot and broke their 5-game losing streak by beating Rutgers 1-0.
In fact, the Scarlet Knights would be shut out until the top of the 4th on Sunday when Morgan Smith singled into center field to bring in Kylie Sand. But Penn State continued their pitching domination to get the victory. The Nittany Lions in the circle were a completely different team than what they showed earlier in the week. Bailey Partial says their staff focused on fixing the little things.
This week in bullpen, we just kind of took the time to go back to the basics, work on some mechanics, and I think that did us wonders.
Reporting for Penn State Sports Night, I'm Allie, Wenskoski.
As you can see, Penn State's pitching really changed up as they take on Rutgers this past weekend, with Bailey Partial and Kylie Ligenfelter being their stellar selves in the circle. But now, Joey, moving over to these next upcoming matchups, Penn State will take on Bucknell at home on Tuesday, and then they go away again to Maryland for a series this next weekend. So what are you looking forward to, and what does Penn State have to do differently or the same as this past weekend to get the victory?
We were talking about the bats a lot earlier, and Bucknell is going to be a bit of a tune-up game for Penn State. They don't have to play in the Big Ten, where they've obviously struggled so far this season. So this game is where I see the opportunity for second baseman Melody Coombs to really fix her slump right now, because that's the best way to put it right now. She's putting the ball in play. She's not finding the holes. She's not striking out as much, but her average has dipped below the 300 mark for one of the earliest times this season, and that's not much like her. So I really expect Melody Coombs to use this game to bring herself back up the lineup. She's been hitting leadoff pretty much all year. Now she's dropping down to the 5 and 6 hole, and I know that's not where she wants to live, and I know that's not where the team wants her to live. So I'd expect her to use this game to really build herself back up, get the hits that she needs to build her confidence, and then it will move her back into a better place for the rest of the season. But then we're going to look also at Maryland, and there's one player that I don't get to talk enough about, and she hits the ball just with such a great approach, and there's a reason why her stats are at the top of the leaderboards for the team, and that's Lexi Black. She is obviously the 4-hole hitter, cleaning up, and she leads the team in extra base hits. The reason why she does that, though, is because of her approach. Everyone knows she has the strong bat. Everyone knows she has the pop from it. But when she's hitting the ball, she's focusing on hitting it straight or getting it into the opposite fields, and all she's worrying about are the gaps. And so when you're able to do that, that was something my high school baseball coach taught me. And when you're able to do that, you get the extra base hits, and it's a great way to see the ball better. And she can also turn the ball when she wants to, but she doesn't try to. And so by her being able to do that, it shows from her success. And it's really been working for her, and I expect her to be a big reason why Penn State will put up a fight against Maryland this coming weekend.
Yeah, I agree with you. Both Lexi Black and Mel Coombs are those consistent players, and specifically Mel Coombs, she's one of those players who consistently gets on base, usually with walks though, so it's surprising that her average is down. However, if she can bring that back up, and if Lexi Black can stay her usual self, Penn State should have no problem as they continue the rest of the season. Penn State struggled in a few of their recent matchups, but seem to be on the right path as they start to get used to Big Ten play. With their pitching going back to the fundamentals, there's no telling what this team will do as we get into the heart of the season. Back to you, Tim and Zach.
Allie, Joey, thank you both so much. Tim, the game against Bucknell on Tuesday is going to be a good one because it's a good separation in Big Ten play. When you have back-to-back-to-back series in the Big Ten, those losses do seem to rack up a little bit, as Allie and Joey both spoke about. The series against Rutgers definitely was favorable for them, but having the Bucknell game before they go and play Maryland is going to be huge for them to rejuvenate the bats, to reignite them, and to ultimately go right back into Big Ten play following that game against Bucknell. But the action, speaking of Big Ten, the action at Panzer Stadium has been very fair to the Nittany Lions.
That's right, Zach. The Penn State women's lacrosse team has continued to impress the college lacrosse world by defeating number 10 ranked Maryland at Panzer Stadium in their last outing. Nolan Collery, one of our lacrosse beat reporters. What went right for the Nittany Lions to shock the Terrapins?
The Penn State women's lacrosse team took on the number 10 ranked Maryland Terrapins at Panzer on Thursday and turned in a performance that no one could have expected a year ago today, an upset win to hand them their 11th win on the year.
On Thursday night, the Penn State Nittany Lions women's lacrosse team hosted the Maryland Terrapins under the lights at Panzer and played the best game of their season. Scoring was led by a three-headed monster. Hat tricks from both Brooke Haas and Megan Murray somehow were only good enough to be the second highest scoring Nittany Lions on the night, as freshman Emma Kelly had the game of her life. 4 goals marked a new high in her young career. The offense looked smooth, even with the loss of star player Gretchen Gilmore in a game against Cornell, which Coach Doherty commented on post-game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we're a great family for our program. You know, one person goes down, we all wanted to play for her. She's been such a huge part of our success this year. And, you know, that was part of our passion and when we went to play tonight. So it's great to see different players step up, have some big goals, and certainly on our defense, they had an awesome game tonight.
Coach put it best. The defense locked down on the Terrapins, and a large part of the credit has to go to goaltender Ashley Bowen, who was a wall in the cage. Credited with a season-high 10 saves and 3 ground balls, Bowen was the rock the Nittany Lions defense rallied around. That defense including Haley Ergo, who was thrilled with her teammates' performance.
First of all, Ashley Bowen was on fire today, so that was motivating. Our defensive coach, Shanna, after every break we had, she said reset, and we're going to come out and we're just going to stop the ball, and we're going to focus on stopping the ball, getting it back, and that's exactly what we did.
Ergo caused 3 turnovers and scooped up 3 ground balls of her own, earning herself the National and Big Ten Co-Defensive Player of the Week, making the win all the sweeter. For Penn State Sports Night, I'm Nolan Collery.
The Nittany Lions look to keep their momentum going this Saturday as they travel to Baltimore to take on the Johns Hopkins Blue Jays. Soon after, the final Big Ten standings will be announced and the tournament will begin. The championship series is set to take place from Thursday, May 4th to Saturday, May 6th in Columbus, Ohio. Now back to you guys at the desk.
Nolan, thank you. Zach, this women's lacrosse team had no expectations coming into it, and that's sometimes the best time to strike. They got a big matchup, as Nolan did mention, going into Baltimore, Maryland to play Johns Hopkins, but what a season for them so far.
Yeah, definitely. And the team that they share the field with at Panzer Stadium, the men's lacrosse team, also making a lot of noise. Number 5 in the country. And our fellow beat reporters, Adrianna Gallucci and Anna Licastro, are here to talk about how their season is coming to a close.
Thanks, guys. The men's lacrosse team jumped to number 5 in the Inside Lacrosse and USILA rankings. They're 8-3 overall and 3-1 in the Big Ten, which is a turnaround from a 3-11 season last year. Anna, what has this team done to improve?
Well, yeah, like you said, big switch up from their losing season last year. Their play this spring has honestly been outstanding. But if we take a look back at their 2022 record, it is full of narrow and even just 1-goal losses, like 11, 12, 14, 15, those kinds of games. And I think their biggest downfall there, or not I think, their biggest downfall there was the fact that they would allow themselves to just get down by a large margin of goals and then not leave enough time for a recovery, a full comeback. Because honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good of a second half or a fourth quarter team you are, eventually the clock runs out and there's just nothing more you can do. And on top of that, they also simply weren't scoring as many goals last season as they are this year. Whereas this season, we've seen them pretty consistently, for the most part, scoring early and also not allowing their opponents to gain any real substantial lead on them, which puts them in a much better position, and it builds their confidence and their energy just throughout the whole game. With how much they've improved over the course of this season, Penn State just had 2 big wins against Johns Hopkins and Michigan. What do you think were some of their keys to success during those games?
Well, on these segments, I've talked a lot about the defense. I've talked about ground balls, I've talked about caused turnovers, and I've also talked about goaltending. But I think we should flip it to the offense. The crowd at Panzer Stadium for the Johns Hopkins game was one of the most electric crowds that Panzer Stadium has ever seen. I think that's pretty fair to say. All stemming from Kevin Winkoff's goal in that double overtime game. The fans loved it, and Penn State lacrosse is proving that it can come out and it can wow its fans just as much as all of the other sports. But we also can't forget guys like TJ Malone, who had 4 goals in that game. So the home field advantage in taking on a Big Ten opponent, Penn State was ranked 8th at the time, Johns Hopkins ranked 6th. Going over to Ann Arbor to play Michigan. Penn State ranked 5, Michigan ranked 15 and 16 by two different poll rankings. Jack Trainer, 6 goals in that game. That's 2 hat tricks. Incredible offensive showing. We've talked all year about the Trainer brothers, guys like the Trainer brothers who can come in right off the bat, get the ball, and put it into the net, which is essentially what the entire sport is about. So I've given credit to the defense all season. I think it's time to let offense have their time to shine.
I honestly couldn't agree more. Jack Trainer had an outstanding performance in that Michigan game, and he was so fun to watch. And then the Hopkins crowd was just awesome, for lack of a better word, honestly. You want to talk about a home field advantage? That is the home field advantage right there. Having that showing of love and support from their family and friends, and then even just fans that came out to watch that game, that definitely helped carry the whole team through all the way through that second overtime.
And the players knew it too. When we talked to TJ Malone earlier in the week, he said that the players and the people on the sidelines could feel the energy that the fans had in the stands over at Panzer, and that was a huge proponent in helping them win in that double overtime situation. But back to the Big Ten. Penn State 3-for-1 in the Big Ten, but Johns Hopkins is also 3-for-1. So Penn State's going to be taking on Rutgers at home, while Johns Hopkins is going to go to College Park to play Maryland. After this week of Big Ten play, what do you think that conference is going to look like?
Yeah, so we're seeing this really even split across the Big Ten right now. You have Maryland, Penn State, and Johns Hopkins all sitting kind of comfy at 3-1, and then Michigan, Rutgers, and Ohio State all down at 1-3. So for those top 3 teams, these last games are going to be a battle for that top spot. Johns Hopkins and Maryland, that is going to be a game to watch. 2 very skilled teams going up against one another, both with great conference records. Although, as we did see from Maryland's loss to Michigan, not to dig at Maryland too much, but I'm sure they can handle it. But anything can happen, so only time will tell for those 2 teams. And then as for Penn State, Rutgers is a good team. They have a strong overall record. However, considering the conference losses that they've dealt with this year, I think a victory to close out the season is most likely a lock for Penn State, meaning that they'll clinch a top 2 seed spot in the Big Ten tournament, and they'll stay towards the top of those rankings no matter what.
Definitely, and the Big Ten tournament is the goal for all of these teams. So we're going to have to see how that conference turns out.
Yeah, well, no matter the results, it's been quite an eventful season for Big Ten lacrosse. For Adrianna Gallucci, I'm Anna Licastro. Now let's take a look at this week's top plays.
Penn State having some crazy top plays once again, Zach.
Definitely. And well, that wraps up our last Penn State Sports Night Athletics update show of the year. And Tim, what a year it was. Penn State Sports Night brought you coverage all the way from Penn State men's basketball Cinderella-like run through the Big Ten tournament and its first appearance in March Madness since 2011.
And Zach, you can't forget about the brand new hiring of head coach Mike Rhodes.
And I think Mike Rhodes is going to be great for the Nittany Lions. And speaking of head coaches, how can you not talk about Cale Sanderson's Nittany Lion wrestling program continuing the dynasty with another national national championship. We brought you all the coverage from their not one, but 2 sold-out BJC duels.
Zach, if we're going to talk about championships, what about the women's hockey team's first ever CHA tournament title? And how about their Pagula Ice Arena neighbors in the men's hockey team going all the way to the Elite Eight, and both lacrosse teams being ranked nationally in the top 15.
Yeah, as you could tell, from pink zone games to dollar dog nights, as we spoke about earlier, and so much more in between. We've had you covered all throughout the year. And even though the school year has unfortunately come to a close, this is just the beginning of your Penn State athletics coverage on Penn State Sports Night. So for Tim Rogers and all of our Sports Night beat reporters, I'm Zach Gershman. We'll see you next year. Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night. We hope you liked that segment.
And we're sure there's other Penn State Sports Night segments that you are going to love as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
And check us out on social media for updates and behind-the-scenes clips and pics. Follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.